Abby had every right to throw me under the bus. I felt truly terrible. The moment it sunk in was actually when Chris announced, we have a meditation by Abby. I'm like, oh, crap. And so I had to go back over there and on my knees and apologize. And the stream of profanity she unleashed on me was very much not in line with the peacefulness and namaste of that meditation. But, oh, no. You know, we were talking a little bit in pre-talk this morning about the way animals can connect with us in such a powerful way. And we're talking about rituals and transition and threshold rituals. And we were talking about how we have funerals for people, but we don't normalize having funerals or memorials for our animals. I have a friend of mine who just recently lost a pet from cancer after a short but difficult battle, and then him and his wife, this is the only two dogs, they're the only two kids they have. So this is extreme grieving and loss, that if you don't have ritual for, you don't have a place for that to go. It's a shame that we don't normalize more rituals for allowing our emotions to move in that way, to allow our hearts to be connected by a raccoon who's grabbing our finger. Bruce Feiler, in his new book, and in a recent New York Times essay entitled, "The World is Feeling Its Way Toward Togetherness, One Weird and Wonderful Ritual at a Time." He says, a generation into the loneliness epidemic, Americans are devising astonishing new ways to gather in real life. Fed up with isolation, polarization, and digital saturation, people are flocking to rituals, collective, elective activities that bring us together for recurring, shared purpose. Eager participants are reimagining how to mark life, love, health, and family, and forging thriving communities in the process. These new types of rituals are emerging in what he calls the renaissance of ritual. That as this new and next and upcoming generations are emerging and recognizing we don't have good rituals to allow space for celebration or grieving or transition, this new generation is making their own rituals. I mentioned last week someone who shared how their family member was celebrating 20 years since an attempt on their own life, a suicide attempt. And we're marking that as a ritual to celebrate the resilience of life. And what a beautiful thing to mark that kind of ritual. Bruce Feiler says rituals are the glue that hold society together, the very first human algorithm. By the way, this book just came out. I've read other books by Bruce and can definitely recommend him, and I'm very anxious to read this one. He wrote a book called The Time Together, How Ritual Created the World and How It Can Save Us. So today we're talking about threshold rituals. Threshold rituals. For thousands of years we gathered, we sang as human beings, we lit fires, we shared food together, we told stories, and we moved through transitions. We created threshold rituals that allowed us to mark things, like entering into manhood or womanhood, marking a passage of time, a passage in life. Threshold rituals. Rituals that helped us process big emotions and then give these emotions someplace other to go than our necks, our shoulders, our jaws, or our late-night Amazon shopping carts. When we don't allow big emotions to be processed through our body and through our nervous system, they can very much collect in the way that sediment can collect in a water line. And before long, we can find ourselves bottled up. We can find these emotions all stuck up with no place to go. Ritual gives those emotions places to go. The goal is not to get over what we feel, even though that's what society tends to normalize it. Okay, good, you've just experienced that loss. It's been about, 3 weeks now? So I think we're done talking about that. And now we can move on with our lives as they are. And we don't allow the space for true grief to emerge, not just in the weeks, but also in the months and years after that original loss took place. In the same way, we have a whole generation of young people emerging into adulthood with no compass, no sense of direction, no ritual that marks adulthood. And so it's no question, it's no wonder then that they're wandering aimlessly and having to craft their own rituals. They're like nomads wandering the wilderness, crafting rituals that work for them. So the invitation, of course, is to move through it. And rituals, we said in the first couple weeks, the definition that we're using is any act done with meaning or intention, especially acts that help us navigate transition, that help reinforce values, maybe in a community sense, or help create a shared identity. Something is asking to be marked. Malidoma Patrice Somé, who wrote the book on ritual that we've been quoting for a few weeks, that Carolyn Coble introduced me to, he says, ritual is called for because our soul communicates things to us that the body translates as need. The soul, our interior world, communicates things to us that our body, or maybe a modern or medical understanding would be maybe our nervous systems, translate as need or want or absence. So we enter into ritual in order to respond to the call of the soul. Malidoma says, we go through difficult things in life, or we experience joys and beautiful transitions. And those emotions are calling for us to respond to them, to process them through our bodies. Something is asking to be marked. So a threshold, if we're talking about definitions here, a threshold is any moment where the old shape of things no longer quite fits, but the new one maybe hasn't fully arrived yet. We talked about that strange liminal space in between when you lose a person and then you have memorial services or funerals. And then in the years to come, you have anniversaries. And at each stage, you're stuck in that space of saying, I feel like I should have processed this by now, but yet new things keep coming up. New emotions keep emerging, asking me to respond to them. Our culture says, get through it, move through it. Some of the thresholds that we go through are obvious. Things like death and divorce and illness, moving, losing our jobs, retirement, graduations, birth. Those are the more obvious ones, but they can also be quiet and subtle. The first holiday after a loss, the first night alone, a friendship changing, a child needing you differently than they have. Realizing your body has changed. Coming to grips with it, coming to accept that. Letting go of an old identity. Or it could be a dream that's quietly ending. Maybe something you've not even whispered to your closest friends. And maybe only you are processing that internal grief. Rituals allow us to have the space to process those things. Rituals help us say something is happening here. Something deserves to be marked. And the reality is, some of us are not great at making ritual or at marking moments or at processing emotions, are we? We come from maybe either a generation or a culture or a family of origin that taught us to just bottle everything up and to just put that stopper on there really, really tight, we're more likely to say, I'm fine, while we're reorganizing our entire garage and going on late night researching into sourdough starters. We don't realize that there's things asking to be witnessed within our bodies, within our nervous system. Sometimes the body is saying something needs attention. The soul is calling to us. Our internal self is saying something has happened and it needs to be marked. It needs to be witnessed or appreciated or noticed or sat with. Ritual is the container that allows us to do that. Whereas some of us are saying, I don't need ritual, I just need a new sourdough starter and a label maker. That'll make everything all better. So what is asking to be marked? What need, want, or absence is our body trying to translate? These are the definitions that we've worked with. That shouldn't be in there because they are old. So let's jump on here to this slide. It says rituals help make it safe enough to feel. When things happen in our body, oftentimes those emotions or those traumas in some cases can get stuck in our bodies because they're too big for us to process safely. And when our nervous system can't process emotions safely or timely, they get stuck. This is why trauma victims have such a hard time moving past, because they're stuck in a repeated memory, and every time they try to access that memory to heal it, their emotions, their nervous system tells them that they're not safe, and so therefore they retreat. Our nervous system will actually try to protect us. And ritual is not about forcing emotions out of us. It's about creating enough safety for the emotions to move. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk, only making it safe for trauma victims to inhabit their bodies and to tolerate feeling what they feel and knowing what they know can lead to lasting healing. The central premise to any form of trauma recovery is finding safety in your body so that you can process those emotions in a safe way. And if you're with an unsafe partner, if you're in an unsafe place in your life, you need somebody else to come alongside you and to help give you that safety so that you can process that. And please, please, ritual is not a crowbar. It's not something to force transformation and change because we're on a timeline here and we got to make this happen. Life moves at a different pace and at a different rhythm. It asks us to slow down and to let the emotions fully process through our system. For some of you, that may be weeks, others may be months or years. There's no one right way to process things. We're each unique individuals, and we have a unique life story. Rituals allow us to inhabit the safety of our own bodies so that we can process those emotions and those feelings. Big emotions can feel threatening. Things like grief and anger and fear and shame and longing and loss can overwhelm the nervous system. This is why if you're coming from a place of trauma or extreme loss, don't simply wander into these ritual ceremonial containers with a crowbar thinking you're just going to unearth all of this past trauma and just get it over with and find healing so you can move on. Our Western mindset wants to think that way, to think that our nervous system is like a house that can be purchased and demoed and flipped and we can have it turned around in 30 days flat. The reality is, the longer the pain has been there, the deeper the emotions are that run deep and are asking for recognition, the longer it may take to process. It may require you sitting with it. A good ritual does not demand that everything come out at once. It gives the body a safe way to approach what is hard. It's things like lighting a candle for someone you miss, taking breaths before a hard conversation. I said in Talkback last week, I was, this past week and a half ago, my daughter from Colorado was out visiting, and so I got to hang with both my adult daughters, 25 and 23, which is always fun. It's fun to see sisters go back into sister mode and kind of like start snipping with each other and just having fun. And Emily asked Chloe a question, and Chloe responded, and before Chloe could respond, Emily's like, why do you always do that? Chloe's like, what? It's like, every time I ask you a question, you always take a big sigh beforehand. And Chloe's like, well, I've been trying to do that because it gives me a chance to take a breath so I can process and think for a second before I respond. I was like, wow, I helped make that child. That's pretty darn impressive. Something stuck. What a great idea to give ourselves the space, the permission to just pause and take a breath before a difficult conversation. Washing our hands after a difficult meeting. Walking a labyrinth. Has anyone had an opportunity to walk a labyrinth in nature in real life? They're so centering as a way to just work through our deep emotions while physically moving through a space. Sitting in silence with others, singing, chanting, leaving a rock on a trail or in a special place, writing down what you are ready to release. A moving example that Bruce shared about in the article in the New York Times was this thing called an honor walk. Maybe some of you have heard about this. This has been repeated across different hospitals. And this is a special walk and it was a ritual that was created for the families of organ donors. And as the donor is taken towards the operating room, loved ones line the hallway and walk alongside the gurney, oftentimes with a favorite song playing, while the hospital workers line the hallway in tribute. This is one such organ donor honor walk. I've not personally benefited or had a family member that's benefited from a organ donation, but I have a strong passion for that as a practice. And it is amazing to me that we have ceremonies and rituals like this to honor those kind of practices. We need more rituals like this. The woman who helped create this ritual calls them small things with big power. And she says, we help people write endings to the stories they never wanted to tell. Emotions need someplace to go. We're emotional creatures. And especially as modern emotional Homo sapiens, we experience so many things, so many sources of trauma and anxiety, and things that provoke deep emotions and feelings within us, things like anger and resentment and bitterness. We're processing all these things, we're receiving all these things in real time, and we're not really good at processing through our nervous system. Most of us don't have rituals to, at the end of the day, sit and breathe and do a meditation so that we can shed any of the toxic beliefs or experiences from the day. Most of us don't normalize ritualizing difficult endings, even though they are calling for us to mark them. Emotions need some place to go. In Healing Through the Dark Emotions, Miriam Greenspan says, emotions live in the body. It is not enough simply to talk about them, to be a talking head. We need to focus our attention on emotions where they live. Big emotions are not just ideas or mental experiences. They are embodied energy. Grief can live in our chest. Anger can live in our jaw. Fear can be that knot in our stomach. Longing can live in our throat. And ritual gives a place for those feelings to go. Especially somatic rituals, which involve the body in some form or fashion, in movement, gestures, in touch, in feeling. And you can do this to yourself. One of the more powerful rituals that I participated in about a month and a half ago was in a weekly breathwork class that I participate in by Zoom. The lady that leads it lives out in California, and I've been participating in these breathwork classes for about 4 years now. So I've done 150 plus. And I was going into this particular breath work the way I'd gone into a lot of them before. You know how if you've done a lot of yoga, you can show up in the studio and roll out your mat and you're just kind of on autopilot. And that's sort of how I was. But I didn't realize that I had some big emotions inside of me that needed a place to go. So in the couple of minutes in the beginning, keep in mind this is a Zoom ritual, so modern life invites us to form rituals in all sorts of interesting ways. And it can happen on a Zoom screen. It was the Zoom screen on my laptop, and I'm sitting on my chair, and Bella's laying next to me. And I started crying and processing some emotions that I had been experiencing from the days and the weeks leading up to it. I experienced this internal sense of breakthrough. And then she led us in an affirmation process, not unlike ones that you would experience in most yoga practices if they're a good practitioner. Very, very generalized self-affirmation. But for me, at this stage of my grief and where I was at in the process, I'd been hearing that from friends or from my therapist. But in that moment, I needed to offer that to myself. And she encouraged us to hug ourselves. And so if you've ever done something like that, you kind of do this number there, which feels strange to do. But I'm laying down and I'm hugging myself and just started talking to myself and offering affirmations. Simple ones like, you're doing a really good job in a tough situation. I'm proud of the ways that you're showing up and doing the difficult work. That particular night was one of the more impactful rituals, experiences I've had probably in several years. And it just came out of the blue. And it happened because I created space because there was a ritual container that was available so that when I had these emotions inside of me, these deep emotions that needed someplace to go, that ritual created a space for that emotion to just bubble up, for me to be able to see them, witness them, process them, and release them. This is about crossing thresholds with grace. Thresholds are part of being human. We cross them when something begins. We cross them when something ends. We cross them when life changes before we're ready for it to change. We cross them when our bodies, our relationships, our beliefs, or our identities no longer feel or fit the same. We can experience it as a molting, as a shedding of skin. Most of us are taught to rush through thresholds. Keep going. Be productive. Stay functional. Don't show your emotions in front of other people. Get over it. You don't need to keep talking about it so much. Move on. Ritual, though, offers us another way. Ritual says, pause here. Sit with these feelings for a moment. Don't just rush through them. Mark this moment. This moment is one that requires marking. Maybe you need to journal and write something down. Maybe you need something from this moment, whether it's a stone or a pine cone or a book or a song or a mantra, something that you carry with you. We live in a society where we can freely purchase anything we want on Amazon, so the value of things have become diminished. Some of the most priceless things I possess are things like a rock from the beach of Iona, Scotland. Things I can't replace or buy online. Things that mark moments, thresholds, transitions. Ritual says, pause, mark this moment. Let others help carry what cannot be carried alone. Listen to what your body is saying. Make it safe enough to feel. Give the emotions somewhere to go. Then when the time comes, take the next step.